Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sia, and I am your facilitator for this evening's webinar, which unpacks a very interesting phenomenon that is imposter syndrome. As usual, I'm not alone. With me is the seasoned MBA holding career and leadership development coach with over 17 years experience in management consulting and a founding member of Ladybug Consulting. Please help me welcome Ms. Kani Mzuli. Hi, Kani.
Hey, Sia. Good evening, everybody. So lovely to be here.
I'm so honored to have you here, actually. And to my right or left, whichever way you are seeing Kanisile. She's an exceptional clinical psychologist and managing director of Kanisisa Wellness and Professional Consultancy. She's also a postgraduate and undergraduate lecturer at UKZN. Please give a warm welcome to Ms. Kanisile Nene. Hi, Kanisile.
Thank you so much, Sia. Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here.
Yes, even in these dark times, we have to have these very interesting conversations.
We have to.
To my audience, please don't be shy to share your thoughts and questions in the Q&A section. I will definitely pick them up as we progress. Hopefully the lights will come back, but in spite of all the challenges, we should hopefully have a very inspiring and very constructive conversation. Welcome, ladies, and thank you very much for having and gracing us with your presence. Obviously, you are very busy, so I'm very, very grateful that we're able to have this conversation, which should hopefully shed a bit of light on this phenomenon, which is often talked about, but not at the right platforms, as it were. And perhaps maybe let me start here, because we often throw this word around, and I suspect people generally fill in the blanks as far as defining what it is. So imposter syndrome, and I'm hoping Kanisile will start first with the more psychological definition, and Ukani will then share from a corporate perspective what the word defines. So Kanisile, let me start with you.
Thank you, Sia. And I think this is a very interesting question that you're asking. It's a very good one, and I think just to kick off, it really is it's a term that we will often hear of, and it describes high achieving individuals who, despite their objective successes, that we would see, but they still feel like failures, or they still feel like they're not good enough, or they fail to actually internalize their accomplishments and have these persisting self-doubts, thoughts of not being great, or, most of the time we say they have this fear of being exposed as a fraud or an imposter. So it's like they don't believe that they've done well enough, so they have these feelings of doubt and being fraudulent, so for to put it. So it's really that struggle where we can say you've done well, but you just cannot internalize and accept that you are capable, you are amazing. You always feel that maybe not me, maybe
something
I have do people actually feel or see that I'm not capable, which is just a lie. It's just your negative thoughts.
Can you
I was waiting for that.
I'll be fine, we'll survive.
We'll be fine. It'll be K, this K and that K, it's all good. So for me, imposter syndrome, if we had to be, quite simplistic about it, is when you externalize your successes is one element, right? It's not you, it is, it has to be, it was luck, or it was a chance event, or it was actually quite simple. I didn't really do much. I don't know why everyone's making such a big fuss. Or I could have done it better, people are going to catch me out. So there's that element that Kanisile spoke about of self-doubt. There's also an element of externalizing anything that is happening and its achievements, but yet you don't feel that they are worthy of any sort of praise. And it's also people who use minimizing language, right? It wasn't that great, man. Anyone could have done it. It's just a fluke or what have you. And it typically, I don't know what the stats are, Kanisile, but I think a large percentage of professionals experience this, and I think probably a large percentage of humans experience this, because if you're not pushing the boundaries, it's rare to feel like you've arrived, because there's always something to do, there's always something to learn, there's more that I aspire for. And so, you know, it's a mindset thing. And I love what Kanyisile was saying, that it is important to know that it's a lie, but I think it's also important for me personally to help fuel yourself to improve. I mean, you can feel like you've arrived, and that's a bad thing, but also not feeling like you are worthy is a bad thing. So it's for me finding that balance, and some days you win and others you won't.
It's actually very interesting that you should mention that, because it seems, and what you're saying a lot of the times relates to, you know, being a humble human being, like, he's so great and yet so humble. And I want to go back to the African culture, because that usually teaches us, especially Black women, to be subservient, you know, have respect for authority, downplay your successes because you don't want to be cocky. And it's interesting because our head of professional development portfolio in our last webinar, she mentions that culture and play and background, it plays an interesting role in how we show up in the corporate space. Do you think then that humbleness and, you know, marrying it with the culture, does it contribute to imposter syndrome, or is it something that we would need to sort of navigate and balance as part of our lives? Yes, Kanye, since you're on that.
Yes. Well, according to the research that's out there, you know, that has been done ever since, you know, this term was first coined, it doesn't really show any relationship or any correlation with culture. So it doesn't seem to be specifically attributable to culture, even gender, even ethnicity. So it's actually not really attributable to our cultures, but it can, in the, you know, like you are saying, well, research is showing that it can affect anybody, but especially high performing individuals. So maybe our cultures, you know, or the reasons why you even have those symptoms of being, you know, of having self-doubts, of having feelings of guilt, you know, it can be coming from our cultures, our backgrounds. You know, maybe we're trying to really achieve as much because you are trying to not be like your older sister, or you're not trying to be, you know, so you have worked so hard to be a better version of yourself. So in that aspect, it can. However, evidence doesn't really say culture or ethnicity or race or gender plays a role. So I don't know if Kanye, maybe in her experience, you know, she's noted something along those lines.
I wanted to ask that, do you agree, Kanye?
I'm not going to disagree with the research. I can appreciate the premise from whence it comes, right? In that everyone experiences it. It's not that it's more pronounced in specific groupings than others. That said, if there are no visual cues of people who look like me, I'm in a room. I remember watching a video prepping for this session of Michelle Obama talking about imposter syndrome. And she would say she'd arrive in a room where she's been invited to advise, for example, to advise on a certain matter. And she'd look around and see no one that looks like her. And immediately the first thought is, it's me, I'm the imposter. I don't belong here. They made a mistake, etc. There's a reason why I am in this room, and it's a mistake. Somebody's going to catch me. And then she said, the more time she spent thinking about it and reflecting, and that lie that Kanyisile says, sometimes we tell us that self-talk that you tell yourself around not being good enough, and you know, you could be better, there are people who are better than you, it was luck, or what have you. That self-talk for her, she became more reflective to say, actually, if I look at myself realistically and the things I have achieved, it's them who are imposters in this room. I have, you know, I've deserved the spot, but it's a lot of reflection. So in my mind, it does matter what you see around you, but the inner talk that you have with yourself will, in all likelihood, improve your chances of managing the feeling when it does arise.
And that's actually interesting when you're talking about that, because a lot of the times we speak of representation being something that we need as Black professionals. And I want to venture on to say Black women, they have a need for representation when they're looking at the people at the upper levels of corporate, the corporate ladder. And incidentally, I had an experience last year where this young lady was sharing a story on how representation allowed her to overcome symptoms of imposter syndrome. So I guess the question then is, how important is diversity and inclusion in addressing imposter syndrome, especially given how untransformed the corporate South Africa is? Ms. Mdluli?
So the leadership journey for all of us is different and unique. I think we all walk a path that is representative of how we were brought up and our beliefs and what opportunities presented themselves, etc. How we put ourselves out, our mindset, right? Fixed versus growth mindset, etc. So if our journeys are different, it helps to a large extent when you see someone whose journey reflects or mimics yours, because it means it can be done, it's possible. So I do believe that representation is an important part of helping people navigate. I love this term of an unofficial board that I coined a while back, like, panel of mentors or people you trust or people who know more than you on certain topics. That unofficial board of the company that is Kanye, if I had to use myself as an example, is important in also balancing my, sanity checking my thoughts and my feelings. But representation helps, because when I see people who look like me, it means that I matter and there's an opportunity and I also can achieve certain things. So in that regard, I think it's paramount, for any organization that is looking to grow talent, Black talent, female talent, whatever marginalized grouping you're from. It's important that you have people who look like you so that you believe that you can do it. That said, it's a combination of what you do internally, the work you do on your own, and the vision and all of those good things that a career coach will tell you to do. The place you want to be, it must be so clear and crisp that every step is taking you towards that. But it's really important to see people who look like you in places of position.
Me, I'm still in the unofficial board, and I've already got 3 internal members in here that I need to have conversations with. Ms. Nene, what's your take?
Well, I definitely agree with Kanye. I definitely agree. I think, it can help if one, if there's diversity, if I can have people that I can relate with, it's easier for me, even if I was doubting myself, then I can always, go to those people that I relate with, and it becomes easier for me to navigate and reflect on my issues. If there's more women rather than more males, and I can easily be intimidated, for example, or if there's only specific majority of, whether be it race, be it gender, then it can really be intimidating for one, and it can increase one's anxiety levels and their tendency to be self-doubting and self-criticizing. So I agree. Diversity is important.
I want to ask, is there a healthy version of the imposter syndrome? Or is imposter syndrome already the toxic layer or the toxic playground around this particular phenomenon? Can you see that? Why do you laugh? I am interested now. I'm very curious.
No, I'm laughing because I've never thought of it. In fact, I've always thought of it as healthier than anxiety. Because I've looked at it as, anxiety, imposter is not a diagnosable condition, remember? It's not a mental health problem, but it is a syndrome. So it can lead to anxiety, depression, and it can be accompanying your personality disorders, such as your avoidant personality disorders, your borderline personality disorders. So for me, I've looked at this as a more not as toxic and not as dangerous as those. So that's why I'm like, okay, is there a definite answer to that? I don't know. What can you?
Yeah.
So I'm always controversial, and I'm going to be true to form. I don't necessarily think the feeling of I could be better, I can learn more, I can show up differently, I can be a better human, better professional is the worst thing that could happen to you. I do believe that in where it's, where it's managed, and I love what Ukanyisile was saying, that it shouldn't be causing anxiety and undue stress, or you're constantly under duress, you're not sleeping, you're, perfectionist tendencies because you feel like an imposter. That's not healthy. But for me, it's around, the whole adage about fake it till you make it. For me, it's do it until you are it, because in essence, the fundamentals are there. It's just the polishing and the refinement and the small but important upticks in performance, or upticks in how you present, or whatever, what have you. So it's, for me, it's fundamental that you never feel like there's nothing more I can do here. I've achieved absolutely everything that's possible. I know everything that I need to know. I think you can use imposter syndrome to fuel you. However, it needs to be a healthy fuel to improve on yourself and on that journey to becoming the very best version of you.
Right. So if I'm hearing you ladies, you're basically saying that imposter syndrome, it is what it is. It's up to you on how you own it. You can own it such that it triggers the anxiety, the stress, to the you're crippled on your career and even on your social life. Or you can actually use it to, yes, own the term, I am an imposter in this space, and I'm going to be an imposter until I'm not an imposter. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is indeed what I am saying. Yes, agreed.
Can you see
own
that?
it, own it. Own how it makes you feel, own what it means for you, and if it's going to help you be better, fantastic. If you're overthinking it, that panel that I spoke about will help you. They'll check you, they'll cure your craze and bring you back to reality. But definitely, I think it can be used as a healthy stimulant. And I'll use myself as an example. I feel imposter syndrome, I don't know, once a week.
Wow.
And that, what that translates into is the areas where I'm not strong, I need to, work on. And the areas where I am strong, I feel a need to share with someone else who could potentially be feeling what I feel. I remember having a conversation with one of my bosses leading up to this conversation to say, what are your thoughts on imposter syndrome? She's like, I feel it every day. And that's how, I stay on top of my game.
Yes.
So I don't know, you need to find your own balance. But the reality is, a lot of the time, there are things we don't know. So if your mindset is, I can grow, I can expand, I can learn, I can, be better, then it's a healthy feeling. But if it's crippling you and you are feeling like there's nothing better you can do, then it's not a good thing.
Ooh, Kanyisile, what's your take? If I'm hearing you, you're also saying it's a healthy thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think really when you are in the corporate space, when you are, as professionals, most of us will definitely experience imposter, but it's really about navigating. It's really about managing it very well, because it can really push you towards being, to working smartly, to working hard enough to achieve and to see the results of your hard work, which can be very rewarding. Just like anxiety, we have good anxiety and we have disabling anxiety, anxiety for exams, for example. As a student, many of us would go through anxiety, but that anxiety is not bad. It doesn't mean it's an anxiety disorder. It's an anxiety that is preparing you that, hey, you've got an upcoming exam, you got to prepare for it. And it really helps you to prepare, right? Because if you don't have and you're just going to be relaxing. And what would happen? You end up failing. But when you do have those feelings, you know, you plan, you put effort. So imposter as well can really work to our advantage if you can, as long as you know. That's why then the strategies become important. You know, when you start identifying the feelings. When do I often have these feelings? What do they even mean? Because like anxiety, those who struggle with anxiety would know, okay, so anxiety is just telling me that, hello, you're not planning hard enough or well enough, just have your ducks in the row, kind of, so you then can allow it to get to the levels where it becomes a disorder, because there's anxiety and then there's anxiety disorder. So if you don't manage it very well as an emotion, which we all will experience, then it will lead to a disorder. And when it's a disorder, then it's when it causes disorder in your social life, in your occupational life, in your academic life, So similar with imposter, it's a syndrome that can be managed. It can work to your advantage. You can take it that, hey, okay, I know it's but it only helps me to improve myself. Don't sit with it and then, allow it to cripple you, because then it can lead to burnout, because you're going to be overworking yourself. It would lead to depression and anxiety, and even dependency and addictive disorders like your, alcohol, because you're trying to cope after a hard day at work, where you've had to spend more hours than usual just to put up a presentation, because you want it to be so excellent, because you didn't doubt yourself that the first two drafts is, okay, this was good enough. You end up putting unnecessary strain on yourself if you're not aware.
Hey, that's very interesting. I want to go back to something that you actually mentioned earlier on, talking about race and gender not being a determining factor on whether you are likely to have imposter syndrome. And I want to venture on to ask, do you find that, specifically being women of color, do you find that corporate South Africa uses imposter syndrome as, some sort of microaggression to say, let's not pay any mind to you? You're just going through imposter syndrome. Do you find that that's a thing, or is it genuinely, mostly Black women that actually find themselves experiencing? And I want to say high achieving Black women that find themselves experiencing imposter syndrome, because again, representation is a thing that's not happening in South Africa.
Right. Well, of course, I'm as a lecturer, I'm a scientist, so I really depend on statistics and everything.
Oh yeah.
From my observations, really, in corporate, in organizations, you'd find that really being a Black or being a woman of color, microaggressions are there. And it's just, of course, now when I say statistics, remember, this is not a well-researched area. So we don't have much statistics to really back up that. Nope, it's actually not. But we do know that, from what's out there, there's no correlations. There's really no significant scientific significance and differences, but really from experience and from observations and from collateral from many Black women, if I can put it that way, colored women, even Indian women that I've worked with, even white women, there's always, as long as there's that majority, then we do struggle. So it's something that does need to gain some attention. I don't know how Kanye you'll navigate around it, especially in the corporate world, but it's definitely there.
So I'd like to start off by saying I'm not sure that people use it against us in a corporate setting, right? I don't know if corporate South Africa uses it as a microaggression. I do though believe that there are certain structural environmental factors that influence how we show up. You've touched on a lot of them, Sia, including culture and how we were brought up and our value system as Africans, as women. and our role that we, the construct of our role in society. And so that does influence how much we show up confident or not. And part of that then influences what the work experience or workplace experience is for a lot of us. And where, for example, we forget that a majority of the people in the room with you are feeling it, and you start thinking you're the only one who's experiencing it, becomes debilitating. So I think for me, corporate South Africa may not necessarily be doing anything deliberately to us to make us feel a certain way, especially around imposter syndrome. Let me say that. Let me clarify around imposter syndrome, because there's a lot being done otherwise. But the reality is, for me, the red flags are everything. Know yourself. Know when certain things are becoming a challenge, and therefore have the strategies that Kanisila was talking about on how you deal with that. I think that's the one way you potentially can think about it. I know I'm solutioning. Sorry, I'm the consultant. I can't help.
I think it would be welcome. A lot of people generally welcome the what can we do about it? Because a lot of the times we are able to identify and signify it's usually the solution side of things. So I think that's where you come in. Both of you, actually. I want to read something from the Q&A sessions. Google says, the healthy side of imposter syndrome sounds like the version where instead of talking to yourself into a space where you are anxious about the spaces you occupy in corporate, you're talking to yourself into pushing and doing more until you are satisfied and actually believe in your capabilities. Her 2 cents worth. I think we've actually covered this, but anything else that you guys want to say? Let me start with Nene.
No, I think she's captured it nicely, because well, I can maybe look at it as fake it till you make it. So,
to Miss Julia's point, yes.
So if you don't feel confident and you know that you're struggling with imposter, so you really just have to work hard, and then you just have to portray that confidence, and it's a healthy way. It pushes you to really managing it quite nicely.
Very interesting. And then we've got one from Yair. Melissa Harris Perry speaks about the crooked room, an analogy that draws our attention to how Black women, and more specifically for this discussion, marginalized people, are expected to live in a world that is crooked, where we are expected to bend in different ways, but never with the liberty to stand up straight. I think imposter syndrome should be turned on its head to call it out, the systematic structures that make marginalized people feel excluded and unwanted. Is there a way to shape discussions about this syndrome that holds exclusionary systems accountable instead of placing the burden on marginalized people to navigate a crooked workplace? Oh, this is loaded. And I actually want to share, because I was also doing a bit of research on this topic, and there was a topic, the Harvard Business Review, where this lady, I think she wrote the book called From Your Token Black Person, where her efforts, she was a Black woman, and she was constantly second guessed and marginalized. And because she was already experiencing imposter syndrome, she thought, oh my gosh, I've been exposed. And in hindsight, it only turned out in hindsight that no, actually, it was, the normal racism and oppression and the feminism that people experience in the workplaces. I wonder if this actually touches that point where we actually need to review the places that we occupy, the spaces that we occupy within the workplaces, before we can actually say, no, imposter syndrome is a thing. I wonder what you guys think about that. Let me start with you, Nene.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that it really starts with, having these conversations out there, because some people don't even know what is imposter, that they're even struggling with it. So if we are going to address it, it's really about raising the awareness, having such conversation like you guys are having right now, when it's eye-opening for some. And so even in other spaces, whatever spaces we're in, it becomes important. I definitely believe that it will take conversation in every corner of influence wherever we are, so that people know what is it that they could be struggling with because they're not aware, but how to also deal with it. And really, it can break the ice, it can break the barriers, and we can assist each other. We can share tips. We can, yeah.
Miss Julie.
Yeah, so I don't know the crooked room, right? So I'm gonna go read up on it. Thanks for that. What I recognize in the if I think about the metaphor of a crooked room, is that firstly, we live in an imperfect world, which means we are imperfect beings in an imperfect world. If you start off acknowledging that, it's a different conversation you're having with people. So I would love to firstly say, acknowledge the fact that it's an imperfect system and it's got many flaws. And one of them is inciting or making people feel that they're not good enough for whatever reason. And there are many. Secondly, I'd like to say that all of us experience it. And I was having this debate the other day. I will controversially say all of us who want to be better experience it. I think somebody who's coasting through life doesn't know what you're talking about, you and your imposter syndrome. So if we're all experiencing it in an imperfect world, I think there are liberties you can cut yourself as a human, is the second point I'd like to make. The third one is, how do we turn the conversation on its head, where we hold, the marginalizer, the oppressor, to account on a topic like imposter syndrome. I would argue that, especially because it's something most people feel when they are highly driven or want to be better, I wouldn't have that conversation, but I would in essence want to start a movement where we are talking about it, and we've talked about it ad nauseum, I know, but you can't talk about it enough, where people start normalizing this feeling that it isn't enough. And it's okay, because you don't have to push beyond certain boundaries, but there's certain things you can do. And that is about there's a self-awareness there that's critical and paramount before you try and change the world around you. I think for me, it's the internal, it's an internal conversation you're having with yourself first, because then you are better able to withstand, I guess, whatever's coming at you from an external perspective.
And it's actually interesting touching on the system, because it has its custodians being, your managers or other people of position and influence. I suppose the question then becomes, do they have a role, or what role can they play in creating a safe space that actually, to Yayeki's point, addresses symptoms of imposter syndrome? What can one do also? I think you've touched on it kind of. In the absence of such spaces, is it all on you to navigate the crooked room? Or is there something that can be done still?
So I start off by, when I feel it, I call it out. So I've actually gone to a superior, someone in a position senior to mine, and said, I'm feeling like an imposter. And these are the reasons why I'm feeling like an imposter, and I just need a sanity check. Not everyone's brave enough to do that. I recognize this, and not everyone feels safe enough to do that. I also recognize that. What I am saying is, when we can feel comfortable to have any conversation in a workplace, that is a good start. And it doesn't have to be not everyone has your back, and not everyone will, and that's okay. It's about picking the ones that will support you. And typically when I go with and I'm using my own personal lived experience, right? I'm bringing that to the table. Typically when I feel like that, I want to talk about it, and I want to talk about it because I recognize that this is a negative conversation I'm having with myself. And so the more voices I can have on this topic, and the more normal it feels, the better. So that's the first thing I think corporates can do, is creating safe spaces for people to say, I am feeling a particular way about my abilities, and they can help you navigate that. Now, in some instances, and in most instances, it's because you are probably pushing yourself beyond what is reasonable, but you also need somebody to recognize that and help you process that. That's the second thing. I think just, creating the safe space, but having people who are knowledgeable enough to have the conversation with you and help you navigate that. Yeah, that's what I'll stop at.
I like that. Miss Nene, what's your take?
Yeah, no, I think it's of course our workplaces, they have a role to play. It's not just you as an individual, as an employee, that must just navigate or try to find ways to cope with it. I believe that our bosses, our employers, can actually help, by making perhaps therapy, can I say therapy, accessible in the workspaces. I do know that many corporate, in the corporate world, we do have employee wellness programs and stuff like that. So it's just a matter of managing or marketing them nicely, and making sure that it's confidential enough for employees and everybody to feel comfortable to go and access them. Because in my experience, I've seen that we may have these services, however, people don't feel they are confidential enough. So these are important, because now you'd want to talk about these feelings of being an imposter with somebody who can objectively help you to say, no, you are capable, you are amazing. Maybe this is where this is coming from, so that's what our workspaces, places, our employers can do, to help us not go through this all by ourselves. But also resilience trainings, those can also help, so that when one is doubting themselves, they have all these programs that are out there that can, reinforce that they are capable, but also maybe creating a system or healthy expectations around what one is expected to do, if I can put it that way, or a culture where mistakes are not interpreted as failures. Because one thing about imposter, they feel like failures, or they actually fear failing, and so we don't want to really reinforce that. So creating a space where therapy is accessible, where resilience programs are accessible, and where expectations are not extreme enough, which may be contradictory to in a way, but
yes.
But we just want to build that culture where mistakes are common and are normal, and failing is part of the process of success, because once okay, this method did not work, then that one, and publicly acknowledging our employees, our employees, or our colleagues successes, that can also help them reinforce this feeling of I am good enough, the very first feeling that even got them to doing what they actually did well. And yet now they start saying, okay, no, I'm actually a fraudster. Actually, no, it's not me. No, we need to publicly acknowledge each other and make sure we're not really critical, and are not with the kind of words that we use when we're giving feedback in meetings, where we're just bashing each other. So I think our managers, our employers, they just need to ensure and facilitate such safe conversations and spaces.
I'm with you. I'm actually keen to hear what Yareri, his response to your take on what she actually wrote, specifically around the room, but I'll leave that to her to address. Kuku, again from the Q&A, is there an opposite version of imposter syndrome? Like someone who overestimates their abilities? Let me start with Kanyisile.
Is there?
Is there an opposite version of imposter syndrome? So unlike, imposter syndrome, you underestimate yourself. This person would then be overestimating their abilities.
Well, I think that would be your narcissist, so where they are overly confident and Yeah, well, I think, yeah, I would say a narcissist would be the opposite of an imposter. Can you
Kanya?
think?
Yes, there is obviously the antithesis of someone experiencing imposter syndrome, in all likelihood are overly confident, maybe don't see any flaws, they think they've done absolutely the best, they are the absolute best, and there's nothing better than them in the room, in the workplace. Now, there are elements of that I am sure can be labeled all sorts of things from a psychology perspective. And I also think there are elements of that are important and healthy around an ability to recognize when you are good at something. Guys, it took me as an entrepreneur making my first bar for me to have self-trust. Up until then, I was a super achiever who was highly insecure. And there are environments that thrive off of that, right? Consulting environments, typically management consulting environments, need you to be insecure and overachieving. So you're constantly pushing the boundaries and yourself, sometimes to the point of breaking. And I have seen people break. So there's a healthy balance, I think, between feeling like, you know, you're an imposter and somebody's made a mistake, you shouldn't be there, and having faith and trusting that I am enough. And I think there's a superpower when you feel like you are enough. There are things that will shake you, but the foundation won't move. And for me, there's a healthy balance there that you would probably need to strike around, you know, overly confident and cocky and narcissistic and sociopath, all of that, and feeling like an imposter. Because I remember also having this conversation earlier in the week. The word imposter is actually, it infuriates me, right? Like, why is it that you feel like you don't belong? Or why is it that it must be an exclusionary thing? Why can't it be another syndrome? So for me, it's a combination of things when people are overly confident and feel the opposite of imposter syndrome.
And it's ironic because specifically given the fact that you're an entrepreneur, there's a certain level of cockiness that's required in, you know, being able to enter those rooms and occupy that space and cement yourself. Whilst we were talking, actually, there's a question that comes to mind. You generally get the, you know, overly narcissistic person on the one end, and on the other end, there's this, you know, very insecure, meek person. Is it possible to navigate, you know, you being the imposter syndrome child, is it able to navigate the spaces with a narcissist in a room? Or is it a matter of just remove yourself, find another space, because this person, you know, it can't be told, obviously.
Called bullying.
Yes, because I think it amounts to that at some point, right?
And how do we deal with bullying? It's really, you need to gain the strength to stand up to your bullies. So even with imposter, you know, then you have to work on yourself. You need to acknowledge that, okay, I am an imposter, and maybe I may have a million reasons why I'm doubting myself, but everything that I've achieved, actually, it's me. Nobody bought me these achievements. So you have to start, changing the narratives, rewriting your own narratives and telling yourself enough. You know, the moment you start being confident, that is when you have the strength and the power to actually stand up to those bullies, to that narcissist. And, you know, because how do we deal with narcissists? You know, there's no medication to treat a narcissist except building the walls, and, you know, the boundaries and maintaining those boundaries. So it's really that there's no injection, there's nothing that can, they need to get some insights. As long as they don't have insights, they can bully you until you can resign. So if you don't want to resign, then you just have to really work on yourself, improve yourself, so that you can rightfully claim what you are claiming, and you can stand up to situations where you feel no, somebody is really either intimidating me because of my gender or my race or whatever, or maybe of age as well, because other people, because they older in the industry or in the company, they may feel like they know everything. So that can be intimidating, and that can lead and accelerate feelings of imposter. So I believe you can definitely draw those boundaries, but you need to start with yourself. Work on yourself.
Like that. Ms. Mhluli.
Yeah, so I have a phrase I've recently learned around calling people in. You know, there's this phrase about calling people out, calling people in. So I don't take very kindly to bullying at all. And I will immediately acknowledge it. Now, whether I'm rude or abrupt or obnoxious about it is a different matter altogether. You know, if I'm triggered, I don't know, some other chick will show up. But if I'm not triggered, I typically, will call it out or call it in. So that's an important one that I agree 100% with Kanyisile on. It starts with yourself. So I will acknowledge it, that this is happening. We can choose how we deal with it. But I will alert you to the fact that I am feeling there's an unequal balance in this room. And I may not be overt about that, but I will say something, number one. Number two, I think it's also important for us as humans to be self-sufficient. I'm enough for me. But that's a journey you have to walk on your own to know that you're enough, because the minute you are bullied, it's a different reaction. It's almost, for me, it would feel like this cocoon that immediately forms that says, actually, impenetrable shell. This is more about you. There's more going on for you right now than there is going on for me in what we're having a conversation about. So I tend to also observe people. That's just a personal thing. I watch people and I'm curious about what could be going on for you to show up like this. But that's not something we are all, either trained or know how to do. And I think with maturity and experience and successes and failures, there's no secret formula. There's no magic bullets. There's no silver bullet, sorry. So you have to go through the pain and the experience of, all of it to know when to call it out. But typically for me, I will always ask myself, what's going on for you that's making you show up like this? And then I'll call it in.
It sounds like, imposter syndrome is part of growing up or growing into a better version of yourself. That being said, what are the 3 tips that you guys can give someone experiencing symptoms of imposter syndrome? I think you guys have been sharing some of your experiences as well. So maybe you can draw some experiences on your side, and I'll decide if I also want to share my side of things.
So I can.
Yeah, definitely.
So 3 things. The first one is it starts for me and ends in your mind. So know your triggers, know yourself enough to know what you're about, and walk that path on your own. And by on your own, I don't mean you shouldn't get, your panel advisors must always be there, but have the confidence to walk this path, because it's necessary as part of your growth. Number 1. Number 2, it's around the conversations you then are having with yourself when you are triggered. So know when the red flags are there. I am minimizing my words. I am thinking this is luck. I am thinking I don't belong. I am thinking there are better people. All those things are happening to me. I'm feeling anxious, and there's a level of anxiety that I know even for me is high. So I know my triggers, and therefore what conversation am I having with myself around those triggers? And then thirdly, this is more on a lighter note. I mean, I tongue-in-cheek said, my boss said she feels it every day. Most people feel it a lot. You are not alone. So walking around thinking that you're the only person experiencing this is futile. Find someone you trust, talk about it, work through it, whatever you need to do. Those are my tips on navigating imposter syndrome.
I love it. Nene?
Just to add, I think she's nicely put it. And I think maybe building a new perspective, for yourself, because now you've been telling yourself this, which we saying, okay, that's not right. So rebuild a new narrative. And that might mean, if you're a spiritual person, for example, how about finding scriptures that can speak positively? For example, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. From a spiritual point of view, that can really help you. Finding mantras, that you can meditate on, finding phrases that can motivate you, or that you can speak to, that can help you build this new perspective of who you are, a new understanding of who you are. Okay, my battery is running low, but yeah, I'm hoping.
I'm almost done, don't worry.
Yeah. And making sure that you reward yourself and you take compliments. Kanye has been speaking about how we tend to minimize, when we are imposters, So minimizing, somebody would say, wow, you look so nice. And you'd be like, no, I bought it from. No, they didn't ask you where you bought it, whether it was on sale or whatever. Just say thank you, so learn to take compliments, learn to also appreciate and reward yourself when you have, done something great. When people tell you you've done something great, stop questioning. And that is part of, rewriting your narratives. And yeah, in addition to everything else that Kanye has nicely put.
That's beautiful. I'm actually very guilty of the latter part where someone gives you a compliment. You're like, actually, you. So I'm also experiencing imposter syndrome there. And one of the things on my side, if I can just share a little bit, one, I think it helps being vulnerable. So owning the fact that, you're going through something that you're not actually sure what's going on, and being able to talk through it, because from there you get a bit of perspective.
Right.
I think one of the things that has also helped me navigate, some of the unfamiliar spaces that I find myself in, is drawing through my past experiences. How did I react when I found myself in a different territory, and that sort of builds the confidence. I think one of the things that I used to say myself, I'm incapable of running a business because I'm not a salesperson. And then, well, actually, I don't need to be selling. I just need to be talking about what I'm actually doing, which is consulting, and I'm very good at my job. So it's almost like drawing from your past experiences and also using those past experiences to say, hey, actually, I found myself in this space once upon a time and I came through. Did I die? The answer is no. So, onwards and forwards, we call type of situation. So I think also that has been quite helpful. But let me end it there, ladies. You've been absolutely wonderful, and I absolutely enjoyed the conversation. Of course, we are out of time, and I think people's batteries are low, including mine. Yeah, I'm surprised we were able to have this conversation seamlessly, in spite of load shedding and all of that. So wonderful. I think we're going to end it there for today. For those that are BMF members, there's 3 upcoming events that are happening, I think, within the space of this coming week, actually. We've got one called Support Programs for Industrial Innovation. That's happening on the 22nd of September. Do's and don'ts to help you on your interview. That's happening on the 28th of September. And on the 29th, we've got a leadership and management masterclass. That's 3 sessions, but check up the BMF KwaZulu-Natal pages on LinkedIn as well as Facebook for all the details around this. That being said, I think my job here is done. Kanye Mdluli, how do people get a hold of you?
Sure. So I am reachable on email, Kanye S for Sierra @icloud.com. I'm also on Instagram as Kanye S. I'm following BMF KZN. If you look for me, you'll find me. Full name Kanye Mdluli. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Kanye Mdluli.
Fantastic. Miss Nene, is she gone?
I think we lost her, yeah.
Oh, snap. So if you guys, what I'll do is we'll make it a point to post all the LinkedIn handles on the LinkedIn profile as well as the Facebook profile. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much, Miss Mdluli and Miss Nene in absentia. hopefully we'll have more of these conversations in times to come, because I think they are absolutely necessary, and they hopefully shed some light on conversations that are generally not spoken about in the corporate spaces.
Cool.
Goodbye and see you next month. I think we've got another topic there called networking and allyship. So I'm very excited about that one as well. Cool. Cheers, Kanye. Cheers, everyone.